National Transportation Safety Board says the catastrophic derailment in East Palestine, Ohio is likely caused by a bad wheel bearing. That's why investigators in Congress are beefing up inspections and maintenance of the country's trains and rail cars.
But one union says it's worried about what our nation's trains are riding on. Tonight, Spotlight on America's Dwayne Pullman investigates the claim that America's railroad tracks are in trouble.
In America, trains carry billions of tons of freight each year. And as the derailment in East Palestine, Ohio clearly showed, some of that freight is toxic.
The most dangerous things you can think about are being transported.
While the National Transportation Safety Board says an overheated wheel bearing on one of the rail cars likely caused this catastrophe, Roy Morrison, who's the director of safety for the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way employees, says some of the tracks are in trouble too. What's the condition of our railroad tracks in this country?
They're poor and they're getting worse.
According to the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, there were 1,183 derailments in America last year. 386 of those were tied to track issues. That's an average of one track-caused derailment a day. But the Association of American Railroads, or AAR, which represents the nation's railroad companies, is quick to point out the rate of track-caused derailments is at an all-time low, down 55% since 2000. Spotting track troubles has turned high-tech. AAR credits cameras, lasers, and ultrasound with catching issues before they become a problem. But Morrison says those high-tech tools have come at the expense of inspectors and maintenance workers who identify and repair the rails. According to the Surface Transportation Board, a federal agency that primarily regulates rail freight, the number of Class 1 inspectors and track maintenance workers has dropped from a peak of 38,618 in June of 2015 to 28,615 in March this year. That's a 26% cut, or 10,003 fewer workers to inspect and repair the rails and keep the trains on the tracks.
They're working crazy amounts of hours to try and get all the defects taken care of.
Morrison says the deep cuts have left the remaining rail workers stretched dangerously thin.
And they're screaming for help.
And is anyone listening?
No. They've been told to hold off on writing up defects.
Morrison blames the pressure and the cuts on precision-scheduled railroading, or PSR, an efficiency model adopted in 2012 by America's railroad companies, aimed at cutting downtime and keeping trains moving.
They're getting pressure to keep the track open at all costs.
In Congress,
you're not going to prevent every train crash, but you can make them less likely.
Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown are co-sponsoring the Railway Safety Act of 2023, which would strengthen safety requirements and inspections and drastically increase penalties for all safety violations.
The railroads have had their way for decades in this body, with Congress, with regulators. Those days are gone.
Morrison hopes the act passes, but until it does, he worries about what will happen next on America's ribbon of rails.
The rail as a whole has multiple ways of failing.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Dwayne Pullman.